Grace Potter, welcome to Biscuits and Jam.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great to see you, and it's really a thrill to have you on. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and
Ah,
love seeing everything that you're doing. Where am I reaching you right now?
I'm at my house in Topanga. So I'm currently on my West Coast run. We are bi-coastal. My hubby's in Vermont. He's coming back to LA today, but we're a creative enterprise that binds the two coasts together. All forces combined.
Well, you may be the first person that I've ever had on this show who's from Vermont.
Really? Oh, that's
Yes.
cool. Yeah, usually that's one of the first things that sort of leads off a conversation out here in California because people don't even often know where Vermont is, let alone that it's a state. Some people think it's a town in Texas, some people think it's part of Canada. I love it. I think it's sort of a, it's some kind of a mirage in the distance for most people, but I grew up there.
But I interview a lot of musicians, and it's not, you know, that common that you see, musicians emerging from Vermont. I know it's got its own kind of music culture, but when it comes to like Nashville, you don't see a ton of folks coming from Vermont.
No, and it's weird because there's a lot of creatives, but we tend to hide in the woods a bit. It's like Vermont is the place that you go to like come up with the idea, and then you go back out into the big wide world to share it. But I'm working to change that because I think there's too many brilliant ideas and wonderful entities hiding out in the woods. So I'm here to help bring them out.
I love it. Well, tell me a little bit about the house and the neighborhood, the town where you grew up.
So I grew up in a town called Fayston. It doesn't have a zip code, but it is sort of the harbor for an enthusiastic, independent-minded ski culture. And I think the boomer sort of influx, the back to the land folks that moved in the late '60s and early '70s. It was a slow development, but I think that Vermont fundamentally changed when people who'd gone up to ski in Vermont realized like I want to stay in Vermont after this. And my parents were both those types of hobbits and found their shire right smack in the middle of central Vermont. And so Fayston is the town, but actually we call it the Mad River Valley because it's sort of a conglomerate of seven towns that add up to maybe 2,500 people. So it was a real small town vibe and definitely a strange place to come from, being that I love being in stage and being presented to the world, and there were literally no stages anywhere except for at the town hall.
Right. Yeah. It was super, super small town.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what your mom and dad did for a living.
So my dad is a sign maker and my mom is an artist and she was briefly a piano teacher. They were living the whole hippie boomer dream and came up here. My dad from Connecticut, my mom from New Jersey. And in the face of their parents thinking it was a terrible idea, they built their own house from scratch.
Wow.
We should build that building that they described in Rivendell. So I mean, my house is a complete it is the Shire, and my parents are very tiny people, so we call it Hobbitville. And I think growing up in that artistic setting and really having there be very few boundaries between an idea and its actuality. It was not even ever called into question. It was just, we want to put on a play. Here's a big slab of wood from the back of a sign. Go ahead and paint it. You want to be the, Frog Prince or the Little Mermaid or Gumby. Like we would always have an opportunity to create, and we were discouraged from watching movies. And if we wanted to watch a movie, we had to be doing a project related to the movie to show how it was linked back to us. Just we can be vegetables. Basically, we had to do something.
I mean, it's just like the polar opposite of today with phones everywhere and, kids spending all their time on screens.
My kid is already figuring out how to break into my phone because he's obsessed with airplanes and goats. That's his two big things. It kind of makes sense because, we travel so much. The airplanes, it tracks. The goats, we have a 120-acre farm in my hometown where there's a lot of land, it needs to be taken care of. We got to get the goats. We need goats. We got to have them.
So, who was the most musical person in your family?
I mean, both my parents were super musical. My mom's a gorgeous piano player. She taught lessons, like I mentioned, but I was a terrible music student. So I would listen to her and I would be entranced by that. She would also sing opera in the morning to wake us up, like obnoxious opera to try to get everybody out of bed. So both my parents have really beautiful singing voices, and both played, in bands when they were kids. But the musician that I emulated the most in my family was my uncle Spiegel. He was the only professional musician to come from any part of my ancestry, and his name was Spiegel Wilcox. He played with Tommy Dorsey back in the day, Louis Armstrong. He had an amazing experience of being in the swing and big band era. And he carried it through all the way up into his mid 90s. And
Was
I
he
just
from
adored
Vermont
him.
also?
He was from upstate New York. He
Okay.
lived, yeah, all I remember is he lived at a place called the Rifle Pit, and he was married to someone named Pigeon, who I never met because he was always on tour. I would always go see him out playing with his band. It was really touching. It was a wonderful thing to experience as a young person.
Wow. You really did have kind of a magical sort
Yeah.
of childhood in a lot of
Yeah.
ways,
Very much so.
and very unique and just so different,
Yeah.
from certainly from, a lot of folks in the South, and I know it wasn't warm up there either.
No. That's the thing I remember the most was, like, the ridiculous amount of gear that I would have to put on to go outside at any given point. I mean, it was like, in the movie The Martian when Matt Damon is getting ready to go out onto Mars, there's, like, all these processes to it, and, like, to this day, the sensation of, like, Gore-Tex or that sort of slimy nylon that's on the inside of jackets, like, if I feel that against my skin, it's worse than nails on a chalkboard for me. I really am. That's why I'm in California, in the winter.
Grace, I've read that you are a pretty good cook. Is that true?
I love cooking. It's so easy. You just take a bunch of flavors and figure out how they go together. And it started at a young age because we weren't wealthy, and my mom was not someone who's like going to go to the store with a recipe and go buy all the ingredients. That was just not a thing. So there was a lot of creativity in the kitchen and just pulling whatever is left out, sometimes questionably old stuff. I mean, we went through my mom's freezer and found something from 1992 recently, still labeled. It was a pesto she made. She was like, "It was a really good year for the basil." What? There was a lot of that experimentation even in the kitchen, and I think it definitely gave me the bravery to try all kinds of flavors and, lean into that.
Well, I saw that you there was a video of you, I think, cooking for your band from years ago, making polenta or something, and were you on the Chew or one of those
I
shows?
was, yeah, I was on the Chew a couple times, and I have become really close friends with a bunch of chefs and people within the food world because it was something very much like filmmaking, where it was like this other passion that followed me everywhere I went. And as much as I love music and found that music was the outlet and the best way for me to share what I have to say with the world, everything needs to be a bit more multidimensional. And this is before like the brand, when now artists have to sort of brand themselves and package themselves. I wasn't trying to do any of that. I was much more interested in taking what I have to offer the world across the board and sharing every aspect of it. Because yes, maybe it feels like a love bomb, but yeah, food is my love language. So it felt really right for me to be able to cook for the band and explore recipes, tour bus recipes. They're different on a tour bus, you have to be able to use a hot
You
plate.
got to get pretty creative, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is there kind of a connection between music and food for you?
For sure. Yeah. And again, I mean, some people play a playlist while they're cooking a certain themed meal. Think about how much music and food have always belonged together. And even when I'm in a studio where the kitchen is somehow connected, or you can smell food, you can smell the coffee, you can tell when the culture is moving from we're just focused on getting this track down today to I think the food just arrived. And then there's an anticipation, and there's a dialogue that goes on there, with everything about the process of making food, because it's so similar to the process of putting together a band and making music. That's why
Yeah.
we call it jamming, you know?
Yeah. There, and that's why we call it biscuits and jam too.
Totally makes sense. Yes.
Well, Grace, you were blind in one eye or legally
Mhm.
blind in one
Yep.
eye,
Yep.
which I assume is something that you were born with.
I was born not prematurely, but late. And basically, they put me in an incubator and it messed up my vision. But I think it was actually part of the development inside the womb as well. And it's both eyes. So what I have is stigmatism, and I'm farsighted, so I get too much light in, and my optic nerve basically can't handle it. It maxes out, and I start seeing double. So everywhere I go, I'm seeing double right now. It's not great.
Did that hamper you in school, or did it kind of
Yeah,
change your development, or the things that you were interested in? I mean,
yeah.
I'm guessing like reading was not, you know, easy for you to
It
do.
was it rewired my brain, and I think what it ultimately ended up doing was very much like what somebody's dyslexic brain will do. I had to learn how to visually add things up and make sense of them in a very different way. So I was often in like the learning resource room. I didn't have an aide that was like with me all the time in school, but when we had tests with the multiple choice where you had to fill in those little those little circles, like just finding the line from the question to the answer was impossible for me. So there was a lot of moments where I was testing really poorly. And at that time, there wasn't quite such a support system encouraging people like me to stick with it. Don't worry. The tests are going to be one thing, but your passion and your interest in this topic is important. And I really lost out on math and science and engineering during my education, and was really pushed toward music because I think everybody wants their kid to succeed, and everybody wants students to feel like they're doing well. But ultimately, I think it limited my ability to explore the realms that I was so fascinated by.
Talk to me about your kind of discovery process when it comes to music. I mean, you've been described so many times as soulful, and that seems to be such a theme in your music. It's definitely not something that I think of when I think of like Vermont music, or
Yeah,
things
I
that you might
know.
have seen locally. I mean, um, you sound Southern.
Yes,
You've
everybody thinks that.
you
I
you
take it as a big compliment.
You have this very profoundly Southern sound in so many ways, and I just think about the influences that might have steered you in that direction. But talk to me about that kind of process of discovery for you.
I think it started with my parents' record collection, because I was hearing music coming out of their speakers that I knew wasn't coming from Vermont. There was a lot of folk music in Vermont. At that time, when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I got really into my parents' vinyl. And they had had a production company early days in Vermont, early back to the land vibes, where they would go out and take photos all day, and then they would combine it with these really exciting immersive soundtracks, and they would project it at bars and sort of local haunts, and put on these really fun, whimsical slideshows that basically were the precursor to MTV. They were basically music videos. And the photos would change, and so they'd be updated almost like social media now, where you can or an Instagram reel, and paired with music that really compelled them. And my mom would always do the music editing and splice the tapes and put tracks together, crossfades, all that stuff that a DJ would do now with a button. But that's why there was so much music gear around my house. We had a couple of different turntables and a Nakamichi tape deck, and 5 CD changer later on. But for me, learning how to handle vinyl wasn't as interesting as looking at the artwork on the cover. I was so visual. And it was the Staple Singers, this one record that the Staple Singers had that was a circle and the family was inside it, but the design of it was so, it made you just feel like you wanted to dive through that rabbit hole into their world. And the music just captivated me at the age of 7. And I knew it wasn't the kind of, it was something about, it felt churchy, but didn't know why. It also felt slightly subversive,
Yeah.
and it was really because of that guitar, and then I got into Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Mahalia Jackson, and I dove deeper, and there was a lot of exploring that. I wanted to find the music that my parents hadn't presented to me.
Mm,
I was
yeah.
interested in diving deeper into the B-sides of things, and the soul music always was what spoke to me the most. And later, when I went touring with Taj Mahal, I was probably 19 or 20, opening for Taj Mahal on tour, and he said, "Well, I grew up in Massachusetts. Like, you don't need to sound like where you're from." In
Right.
fact, he thought that, and I agree with him, that growing up somewhere where we don't have a signature sound and stamp of like, this is the brand of music that comes from this place, actually leaves you much more open to exploring all genres.
It's kind of freeing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if you've met Mavis Staples. Yeah.
Yes, she's my son's godmother.
Come on, really?
It's not on paper, but she goes, "How you doing, God baby? How you doing, God baby?" Every time. I mean, he was born, I was pregnant with him when I played one show with her, and the next time she saw me, he was fresh. So it was just, that was the christening right there. And she gave me a rose that I still have, in a book. She's a dear friend and one of my deepest inspirations. And I've opened for her a bunch of times. And, I'm always thinking of her. I think about her at least twice a day.
What a beautiful thing. She is really something else. I've always wanted to have her on this podcast and we have not been able to make it work, but hoping someday.
Got to get in there. She's
I
also
know.
a very big foodie. And yeah,
Yeah.
so I think you guys would have a really good conversation.
Okay, we got to make that happen. So, Grace, you have a son now who's 7, right? About the age that you were talking about all of this happening to you. Um, you are known for this kind of, just hard rock and music. I mean, so much of what you've done is it's rock and roll in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And your performances. And I'm wondering, since you had your son, if that's changed, profoundly changed your songwriting, or your
Mm.
approach to music.
I just realized I had a dream last night that just came to me. I'm recalling because of what you just said, which is that it has changed my songwriting. My answer yesterday would have been no. But I think what happened is having a kid makes you see the world with fresh eyes. You have to put, if you have any level of empathy whatsoever, you have to imagine what your nonverbal baby is thinking or feeling at any time. And the filter through which a child sees the world is a beautiful one. And it's reformed my understanding of darkness and light, just sort of these subjective, the things that we love writing about, and the things that, all movies are based on, and true crime podcasts and all that stuff. Suddenly, instead of feeling hardened to it, I like to lean into that curiosity. And I think that in my lyrics, that has definitely turned a corner, where before, and I used to just be like, but it's all going to be okay. That was kind of my conclusion to everything. I would always want to wrap it up into a pretty bow. And I think that was for myself. But what I've found in writing songs since my kid has been born is that it leaves it more open ended.
Mm,
There is a to be continued in all of my songs now, where doors are getting closed, bridges are getting burned, all the same things that were happening before. But the growth that can come from even the greatest misfortune is not about, and they lived happily ever after. And I can't wait to see what happens next.
mm,
And my dream last night, I was having a conversation with sort of an amorphous friend that was maybe represented 3 different people in my life. And they were sitting with me at the kitchen table, and I had my knees up, and they were telling me your songs have just changed so much. It's just really interesting that you asked that question. No one's ever really asked it before. So thank you for throwing me down the space-time continuum portal back into my dream.
Happy to do that. I mean, Grace, you're at this really interesting juncture in your career. And, I look back at your last record, which was so great,
Thank
Mother
you.
Road.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much fun. And uh, my daughter actually wanted me to tell you that she saw you I think it was last summer with Chris Stapleton,
Yeah.
and she was just raving about that show. There are so many great songs on that record, um, and I remember she was talking about this one called "Good Time"
Yeah.
and played it for me. And this is a song that kind of dares you not to dance. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really fun. It's really upbeat. Um, what kind of reaction do you get when you play that one at a show?
It is the boogie anthem of the show, and it's always sad when we don't have time for the full song. Sometimes we have to sort of do an abbreviated version, but it's like people keep dancing to the song even after the song is over. I'll play like a sad song right after that. Because with Stapleton, we only have 60 minutes, so you have to sometimes do an abbreviated version. But I swear the crowd is still bopping like three songs later. And I've really, because I'm blind, I really feel this pulse with an audience, and I communicate with the audience in a very specific way. I never am able to pick someone out of the audience because, well, I can't see them. So instead, there's this throng of energy that comes at me. And in order to be able to communicate it back, um, I have to sort of dispel my own contained energy. And I think that song is actually just the seed of that feeling inside me, that there's an electrification that goes on when I'm performing live, where I just basically am an antenna for the audience, and sometimes even for people that are floating around up there that aren't at the show. Tina Turner comes down a lot and says,
And
"What's up?"
visits.
Yeah.
I can see that.
She's definitely one of my greatest heroes of all. So I think there's that energy with that song. But the whole record was meant to do that. I think the record is meant to feel like the wheels turning and like momentum speeding toward who knows what, and that's really what all dance songs should be. You shouldn't really know how they end.
Yeah, it's such a great song and a great record, and so much fun. Um, and now here you are about to bring out this new album that's called Medicine, which is not actually that new,
No. No, it's not. Yeah, it's
um,
wild.
because it was recorded 17 years ago
Hmm.
when you were 20 something,
Oh, yeah,
24 or
very
5.
young, early 20s. Yeah.
And so you recorded this with T-Bone Burnett, and it's kind of a crazy story. Um, and I'm just wondering, you know, how did this happen exactly? I mean, you make what you probably thought was going to be a breakout hit record, and you must have been so excited to work with T-Bone. Um, and then it gets shelved. How did that happen?
There was a time in that same year as I was writing for my next record where I've sort of felt the pull of some fate that was unknown to me. Uh, Basically, it was fame, but it was like there's a few ways that fame can come upon you, or that you can wander into the idea of wanting to be a public figure. And for me, a T-Bone Burnett record was exactly the legacy presence that I always admired and respected and observed as true to form for me. And I think as my character came out, and especially with the executives and my management and even my bandmates who knew me well, they were like, "You are not a legacy act. You are a crazy person." You know what I mean? Like, and for me, I really do wonder how my career would have spun in and what directions it would have spun differently, because it was a tactical decision based on the youth and energy and just the charisma of my songwriting, but also my stage presence, which I think no one really knew how great, I could be, as far as a live performer, until I started finding my stride, especially at festivals. You know, we were playing Lollapalooza. We hadn't quite played Coachella yet, but we'd done Bonnaroo like 3 times. And these very large national platforms were starting to witness this electric and hypersexual and hyper, like just a profound, like I'm an organism that is unstoppable and you know. And the T-Bone record was meant to channel that energy into something highly artistic, highly intentional, and with a purpose that would focus that energy into like a laser beam. And it did. When you hear the record, I think you'll understand how it did that. But for me, I was devastated to find out that it was getting shelved because I truly felt like, okay, well, there goes my chance to be a classy person forever. Like,
Right.
I just was like, because what was presented to me was that my band and my live show was just popping off, and everybody knew that this was just an unstoppable force and that we needed a record with energy and charisma that belongs on the radio specifically. So this was all back in the time when radio hits still really mattered. And when we could take that public image that was starting to form and match it to something that could go across many platforms. Whereas with T Bone, I think there is a very specific listener group. Most of them are brilliant um, fans of film and cinematic universes. They do a lot of reading. They're audiophiles with very expensive sound gear, and that to me was the crowd I was very excited to court. But I didn't account for the fact that young fans and people who listen to the radio, or even just passive listeners who are just kind of like blah blah blah, flipping through the channels, might see something really exciting, and the sound needs to match that. And so, yeah, the executives decided that the T-Bone sound and that brand and that package didn't quite match with the trajectory of what they wanted for me. And to this day, I don't know whether that was for good or for bad, but I am happy that I got a chance to play that record a few times for the people that I really wanted I wanted them to respect me, but I also felt like I gained more an understanding of how my fan base receives things, because everybody who heard that record was like, "Wow," but definitely also was like, "This is a vibe," as opposed to, "This is a smash hit." And so I really think that's when I'm thinking back to it, it's like we gave them a beautiful, train going through, South Africa with a dining car from the 1920s, and they wanted a carnival on a spaceship,
Right.
you know? I like both. Yeah.
Well, the irony of all this to me is that this record feels very much like a record that, should be coming out right now.
T-Bone said the same thing when he listened back to it again. It was like, this might be more contemporary now than it was then.
It seems very timely. Um, I want to ask you about just a couple songs, and one is it's the first song on the album, and it's called "Before the Sky Falls." Talk to me about kind of where you were in your life personally at that moment when that song when you wrote that song.
That was a co-write with an amazing writer, who at the time was living in New York City, named David Poe. And remember, this is very close to 9/11. Post 9/11, New Yorkers were vividly aware of not only the infrastructure that they existed in, but also the claim that they wanted to hold to their soul and the furniture that can't burn up in a fire, the pieces of themselves that belong in the universe. And he had a lot to say. We had a lovely conversation before we started writing the song. And for me, coming from a place where there is literally no infrastructure, the city is as far from Vermont as you could imagine as far as the culture goes. And so I think that the combination of my boundless exuberance and my excitement about this connection, two humans connecting, even in the midst of the most catastrophic loss, really resonated for both of us to a point where we were like, all right, so verses are doom and gloom, chorus is hope, and even a question, it brings up this like, but if we could fall in love before this all falls apart, is that salvation? Maybe.
It's a great song, and
Thank you.
It does not seem um, tied to any specific time. It has a kind of timeless quality to it. So it's interesting that, the thing that you wrote 20 years ago still seems very, very timely, maybe even more so now.
Thank
Um,
you.
Grace, there's one more I want to ask you about, and that's the song called "Losing You." Um, and this was after, not long after "Raising Sand" came out, the
Mhm,
Alison Krauss album, and
mhm.
Robert Plant, um, and I feel like there's some echoes of that
For sure.
in this song.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same session players,
Yeah,
and that was a big piece of this record was that T-Bone already had this crack crew that just he knew they have a shorthand and they can just make a song come to life. And Jim Keltner, being the drummer, really set the tone with just this driving very just hyperhuman percussion. It was like many, many hearts beating all at once. The way that he would create these soundscapes with just drums, because I'm hearing pitch and I'm getting ideas just based on just the clamor of like this wood clacker thing he had on his percussion tree. Just would take me off into a stratosphere of creativity. And I had the song written, but it changed in the studio based on what I was hearing, because when I had that song in my mind, it was like an FU breakup song, It was just like a forget it. I guess I'm losing you. It's over. And when I got into the studio, there was just so much more reflection and sort of turning over of a thought, the way that you would when you're laying in bed and the rhythm just rattles you out of bed. You can't live in that feeling. It's like when you have restless leg syndrome, but all over your body and in your heart.
I haven't heard that one before. That's great. Well, it's a great song and a great record, and there's so many other good
Thank
ones
you.
on there. And
Thank
I
you.
know you're excited to get it out in the world finally.
It's such a fun thing to be able to do this. This is such a different approach, releasing a record that is not of this time. It feels like time travel. I didn't know if there would ever be the right moment for this. We talked about the 20th anniversary of it or something, but nobody else knows that it's the 20th anniversary. Who cares what years and time doesn't exist anyways, at least in my brain. So it didn't matter when it came out. It mattered that it came out. And so many fans have been waiting so long for this. It felt like a great gift to offer the world at this point.
Well, Grace, you've got some big things coming up in the very near future. You're gonna sing the national anthem at the Kentucky Derby
Yeah, yes.
in
I've
front of
got
a
my
lot of people.
Yeah, it's gonna be wild.
So I know that you've done this before. I think you sang it at a Patriots game
I
um,
did. Yep.
at least once, and
Yeah, the kickoff for the football season. Yeah, 2015, I think that was.
I went back and watched that. It was so great.
Thank you.
But I'm guessing you've been practicing a lot.
Yes.
And
Yeah, you can hear like when I'm picking up my kid, you can hear me going like, "And the Rockets red glide," like in the car as I'm coming in. They're like, "Oh, here comes Miss Potter." Oh boy. Yeah.
so tell me about this song and what is the hardest part of singing the national anthem?
The break between like your head voice and your chest voice, because those big notes, and also E, the land of the free. E is the most closed off of the open vowels that you can sing, and it does not sound good in chest voice. But Whitney did it, so I'm determined to figure out how. But if I can't, it's okay. But I think that it really is those breaks in your voice. It's one of the most challenging vocal songs to sing. That's why, so many people botch it pretty darn good. When I hear it in its finest form, it's usually instrumental. It's not
Mm.
it's no one singing it, because it is a gorgeous piece of music, but the vocalization of it is challenging. It's a little bit like playing the bagpipes, which I did do as a young person. Um, there's this break. There's just these points in the dynamics where your voice is being asked to do something that would be better performed by an instrument. Um, but I love a good challenge. And, this is as far outside of the box for me as a rock and roll singer as I could go. But that I don't know, life is too short not to try everything at least once, twice if I like it, you know?
What does it mean to you to sing this song in particular? I mean, what does the national anthem mean to you?
It's a difficult thing right now for me to think about what the context is. I think I always land on visuals whenever I don't feel that the message and the heartbeat or the sort of unifying intention of that song is present in the country right now. It's certainly, I think all sides could agree that this is an incredibly divided time. And this is a song that is meant to really calcify a communal heart and the intention behind a group of people from hundreds of years ago who got an idea that they belonged together and that they could build something better together. And so when I can't find that piece in my deepest realm, I go for the visuals because I'm a cinematic person. I'm a filmmaker and I think about things through the visual landscape. And I often will close my eyes and the movie will sort of come to life. So for me, that's happened a lot with the anthem because there are so many beautiful descriptions of a space. And so if I need to just get to a deeper part of my soul where I'm truly feeling the emotion of it, I'll place the event that is being described in a location that is near to my heart. So
Mm.
the Burlington waterfront in Vermont, or the top of Camel's Hump in Vermont, or right here out at the beach in Topanga, or right over the Palisades Park, where Topanga is directly next to Palisades with the fire that just happened. There's a deep soul connection to those mountains and the way that they meet the ocean and the loss and destruction that occurred, but also the unification of so many people in that community. And I prod my soul until I can barely take it anymore emotionally, and then the right performance comes out of me.
And you can see all that when you're singing.
Yeah, whenever my eyes are closed, you don't have to wonder. I'm just picturing fireworks and a deep, I think a deep cause. There's like a purpose to the song. And I can minimize it into the microcosms of places that I can relate to. And then suddenly the meaning just swells up inside me.
Speaking of visuals, do you have a hat picked out?
We're dealing with that right now. I have, let me show you. This is what I'm dealing with. Hang on. This is I've got a box with feathers, with brims, with like, pins and needles and threads and flowers and feathers. And this is what we're dealing with. Like I somewhere in here I'm gonna build it myself. I'm gonna make this thing. I've taped a lot of things to things. This is like, if we wanted to go like Blossom 90s vibe. But yeah, I just decided that I would buy all the accoutrement and explore. But ultimately that it would just all be kind of proof of concept. And then I would let a real hat maker actually bring it to life.
Oh, I mean, you have some great options in there. The tyranny of choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just like creative projects, so yeah, yeah.
Well, I got to ask you one more thing. There must be some fun kind of behind the scenes moments in this whole process. What's something that you've kind of learned about the Derby or gotten to experience or that you're going to get to experience that you're excited about?
I don't remember the name of the structure that I'm performing on, but they just redid it. It's sort of like it's like the Queen's little booth, like in an opera place, they have their own little spot to watch from. It's not called the cupola, it's not called a gazebo, but there's a stand, it's a grandstand type thing. And people would always say when I was a kid, like, "Oh, she's grandstanding again." And now I get to actually do that. And I think that there's some fun, just like poetic justice to that. But mainly, it's been about the placement of the horses and how close I'm going to be to them. I mean, I'm right there, and it's really, the moments before the race ignites. I'll be standing right there, and I really got into just watching videos of how the race commences and how much space there is and how much anticipation is involved because that's what it feels like before a great concert, before you're waiting for your favorite artist to come out on stage. But it's like every horse is a rock star, you know? I've been exploring just basically how to keep it together and not get overexcited in that moment because I think it's going to be a lot of energy and a lot of excitement.
Well, I'm sure it's gonna be great, and, I can't wait to see it and hear it, and, congrats on the album, and,
Thank you.
congrats on the new record, congrats on everything you're doing. Thanks for being on
Thank you
Biscuits and
so
Jam.
much. Absolutely, Sid. This was so fun. It was great talking to you.